Okay, now let me introduce strategies of unification by both Koreas. But strategies of unification were never openly discussed in South Korea nor in North Korea, but only by a few presidents and scholars in South Korea in the past talked about the unification. The first idea about unification is not a direct unification strategy, but is an idea of the unification was made by Kim Dae-jung in 1970. Because of this, Kim Dae-jung was considered to be pro-North Korea, and he was imprisoned because of this idea. The cross-recognition. And Kim Dae-jung argued the cross-recognition is necessary in order to ease the bilateral tensions between the two Koreas. The idea is simple. The US and Japan recognize North Korea as a country, and the USSR and China recognize South Korea in return. But think about the timing of this. In 1970s, this is in the heart of the Cold War period. So it was unthinkable at the time. USSR and China, which did not have any diplomatic relationship with South Korea. And perhaps the US and Japan could recognize North Korea if the conditions are met. But it was unthinkable for the USSR and China to recognize South Korea. And it was unrealistic in 1970s and unthinkable during the Cold War period. But after 1990, in the post-Cold War period, it lost its utility because South Korea had diplomatic relationship with Russia and China. So basic idea of cross-recognition lost its utility after 1990. But it was a very significant and amazing idea during the Cold War period made by Kim Dae-jung. Second idea made by South Korea was firstly by the President Roh Tae-woo. And his successor, Kim Young-sam, who was the first civilian leader in the South Korean government after the Seungman-rhee. Because before him, all the leaders, presidents, or ex-military generals with authoritarian leadership. But he was the first civilian leader. So President Kim Young-sam suggested an ethnic community unification plan in August 1994. The idea is simple. Two Koreas should unify, make unification targeting for the establishing ethnic community. This basic idea was taken from President Roh Tae-woo's Korean People's Community. It had 3 steps. First step, both Koreas seek for reconciliation and cooperation. Second step is make a Korean federation. One federal government and 2 local governments. And the last final step is to achieve the ultimate unification. And let me introduce North Korean proposal of unification, the so-called Korea Democratic Confederation. This was claimed by Kim Il-sung in 1980. In the Korea Confederation, there's one common federal parliament or assembly and one government, federal government, with two different systems. Basic idea is the same as Korea, South Korean. One federal government and underneath it, two local governments. And it has three principles of federation. First, self-reliance. This means the U.S. must withdraw its forces from South Korea. Self-reliance. Second principle is peace. Kim Il-sung obviously wanted a peace treaty with the United States. That's a peace. And third principle is the achieving greater integration. Greater integration meant a coalition government with communists within South Korea. In other words, South Korean government must allow the communist parties and communist people, and there should be a coalition government in democratic people and communist people within South Korea. And then they could achieve the confederation later. So it was unacceptable, obviously, by South Korea nor the United States. In April 2018, South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un agreed the nuclear-free peninsula at Panmunjom meeting, at Panmunjom. And they declared the so-called Panmunjom Declaration. And President Moon's basic policy toward North Korea is the same as Sunshine Policy, which was argued by former President Kim Dae-jung. With the Sunshine Policy, Moon promised and declared three principles. First, South Korea would never allow North Korean physical provocation or violence. In other words, South Korea would not gonna tolerate North Korean physical violations. In other words, North Korea should stop the physical violations against South Korea. And second, South Korea would never attempt the obstructive unification. This is the West German style of unification in Germany in 1992, after the demise of the former Soviet Union. The superior system of West Germany absorbed the inferior East Germany. But I mentioned that this possibility, the obstructive unification, was something that North Korean leaders, particularly Kim Jong-un, is afraid of. If anything happens in North Korea or the interdependence between the two economies in North and South Korea becomes deepened, North Korean economy might be absorbed to the South Korean economy. So North Korea doesn't want to hear even obstructive or absorption in its relations with South Korea. And then South Korea will seek for reconciliation and cooperation with North Korea. These principles, the fundamental base of these principles are from the Sunshine Policy made by Kim Dae-jung. So at present, Pyongyang is extremely concerned of an obstructive unification to the superior system of Korea. So these days, we don't see any discussions or any mentions about the federation nor unification from the North Korean leaders' rhetorics or announcement or declaration. So it seems like the prospects of unification is getting far from out of the reach of the Koreans' hope.